when delegation becomes default. Across longer time horizons, the quiet changes matter most, not the tools we adopt, but the skills we stop rehearsing. Automation often arrives as convenience, then settles into default. When delegation becomes the default path, the first skills to disappear are not the glamorous ones, but the audit muscles, the ability to notice drift, to recreate a result from first principles, and to judge whether an output is trustworthy under new conditions. At scale, this erosion is not a personal failure, it is a systems effect. Repeated delegation lowers practice. Lowered practice reduces verification capacity, and reduced verification capacity increases the appeal of further delegation. The mechanism is straightforward, but the outcomes are not. Delegation is rewarded because it compresses time and reduces visible effort. The incentive is efficiency, faster throughput, fewer steps, smoother surfaces. The constraint is attention. Human review does not scale at the same rate as automated production, and scrutiny is expensive in time, cognition, and coordination. In the short term, delegation feels like pure gain. A task is completed, a decision is drafted, a plan is formatted, a classification is produced. The trade-off is subtle. Speed replaces rehearsal. When a system performs a task repeatedly, the human operator practices less, and skill decays in the background. What disappears first is not the ability to press the button, but the ability to explain the button's consequences, to spot edge cases, and to reconstruct the reasoning when the environment changes. Over the mid-horizon, the feedback loop strengthens. Less practice leads to more reliance on delegated outputs. More reliance reduces the perceived value of maintaining internal expertise. Reduced internal expertise makes audits slower and more uncomfortable. And because audits become painful, they are performed less often. This is a dependency loop with an economic logic. The organization, team, or individual reallocates attention toward what is measurable and immediate, and away from what is latent and protective. Across longer horizons, a second-order effect emerges. Delegation reshapes what counts as competence. Competence becomes the ability to orchestrate tools and present outputs, rather than the ability to interrogate assumptions and detect failure modes. As this norm spreads, the system's error correction capacity shrinks. Small mistakes can persist longer, because fewer people can recognize them, and when corrections do occur, they are harder to justify, because the shared language of underlying methods has thinned. At this point, another constraint becomes decisive: recovery capacity. When conditions shift, new inputs, novel contexts, unexpected interactions, delegated systems can behave in ways that are locally plausible and globally wrong. If the human layer cannot audit, the system defaults to trust. The trade-off becomes explicit. Either invest scarce attention in verification or accept higher tail risk. The uncomfortable truth is that both options have costs, and which cost dominates depends on uncertainties that are not fully knowable in advance. The frequency of edge cases, the severity of failures, and the availability of people who still remember how to do the work without the delegation layer. So the skills that disappear are the ones that are least rewarded until they are urgently needed. Careful checking, principled reconstruction, contextual judgment, and the ability to say with evidence, this output is unfit for this situation. This is not merely about productivity, it is about governance and responsibility. Any system that delegates by default quietly relocates accountability, from the doer to the tool, from the reviewer to the metric, from the human explanation to the produced artifact. What we pay attention to becomes what we can govern. When attention is redirected from understanding to throughput, the space from meaningful responsibility narrows. Values are encoded in what the system permits, constrains, and ignores. If a workflow permits fast delegation but constrains slow verification, it is not neutral. It is selecting for a certain kind of behavior and, over time, a certain kind of person. The human consequence is not simply less skill, but less shared capacity to justify decisions, to contest errors, and to coordinate repair. In environments where trust is required, the ability to audit is part of the social fabric. When it thins, confusion and blame become more likely, not because people are worse, but because the system removed the practices that made clarity possible. Let there be a single moment of reflection on a mid-horizon, 6 months to 2 years, and on one hidden assumption, that delegated outputs will remain auditable when it matters. Name one tail risk that becomes plausible when verification capacity shrinks, a decision no one can explain, a classification no one can contest, a process no one can rebuild under pressure. Notice, without judgment, which skills in your environment are celebrated and which are merely presumed to exist in the background. Automation can extend human reach, and it can also hollow out the hands that would steady it. We stand under uncertainty with disciplined humility. The future is shaped by constraints, not wishes.